All right, so let me just get this out of the way. If you thought last week's sermon was dry, welcome to the Sahara of sermons. Joshua chapter 12. Please find your place. If you do have your Bibles or your gadgets, if not, you can follow along in the projection in front of you. So Joshua chapter 12, we are more or less in the halfway point of this book, both thematically and I guess quantitatively. There are 24 chapters, so this is chapter 12, so about halfway through as far as quantity, but thematically there's a definite end to the first portion of the story, which was just about conquering the promised land. And now, the remaining portion, the second portion of the book, mostly focuses on dividing up and the allotment of the land to the 12 tribes. And what we will see here in this chapter 12, and again, much like we did last week, we are covering the entire chapter, all 24 verses. It's just a list of names. But not only names, really hard names to pronounce. And I'm sure if you just read this once, it just kind of seems like you were dropped with a parachute into a graduation ceremony from a foreign country. So these names don't really mean much to you, very likely. And again, very hard to pronounce. And just a list. Literally what we have here is a list of 33 kings/regions that were defeated and conquered as this portion of Joshua is being summed up. What we will see is the first portion, the first 6 verses, the focus is on Moses, and then the remaining portion, the focus is on Joshua as to how they led the children of Israel in this period of their history. So that's sort of what we have here in store for us. And I guess the encouragement, as I've done before, and I will continue to do it, because every once in a while we will get texts like this, as you're familiar. We just kind of go through the Bible, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book. Every once in a while there is a more difficult text to do a sermon on. But again, the encouragement is for you to kind of step out of your reality and, to the best of your ability, just put your mind, your heart into the reality of those that this was originally written for. So again, try to bypass the mindset of this just being a random list of names, because to the original readers, this was very important. Just think about the perspective of a soldier who had just gone through these battles. Took about 7 years or so. That's kind of the estimate, 5 to 7 years. And all of these battles were won. Most of them, we've seen some that were lost, but then they went back and beat their foes. But, you know, it's still war, it's still battle, and now they are towards the end of this process. And for them to just hear this summary, it must have been very uplifting. It must have been invigorating. It must have been, there was a sense of pride, a richness involved in hearing this at one time. And even if you think about the generations that came after, people who would have been interested in knowing, why are we here? How did this come to be? And maybe even in times of trouble, this would have served as somewhat of an inspiring note, knowing that all of this was achieved through God, and God is still there and remains their God. So if He was able to lead them to do this great feat, why can't He continue to do so in whatever circumstances that they were experiencing in that present time? So again, try your best, but I know it's going to be sort of challenging. I call this, passages like this, the visitor killers. If you're visiting for the first time, I am sorry. Every once in a while, again, it happens. It's sort of like, when I have passages pertaining to, I guess, the obligations and the responsibilities of different family members, including women. And then I know for a fact there's going to be a ton of women on Sunday. So here we have that as well. So let's read, and you can follow along. I'll do the first 6 verses first, and then, because that's the portion that Moses is the focal point, and then from verse 7 to verse 24, that is the portion that Joshua is focused on. So let's read this first part, again from verse 1 to verse 6, and you can follow along. And it says here, "These are the kings of the land whom the children of Israel defeated, and whose land they possessed on the other side of the Jordan towards the rising of the sun, from the river Arnon to Mount Hermon, and all the eastern Jordan plains. One king was Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon and ruled half of Gilead from Aroer, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, from the middle of the river, even as far as the river Jabbok, which is the border of the Ammonites. And the eastern Jordan plain from the sea of Chinneroth, as far as the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, the road to Beth Jeshimoth, and southward below the slopes of Pisgah. The other king was Og, king of Bashan, and his territory, who was of the remnant of the giants who dwelt in Ashtaroth and at Adri, and reigned over Mount Hermon, over Salcah, over Bashan, as far as the border of Geshurites and the Mechahites, over half of Gilead, to the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. These Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel had conquered, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, had given it as possession to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half of the tribe of Manasseh." So here we have the account, and we've mentioned this before. The actual story is not found in Joshua, but actually in Numbers chapter 21 from verse 21 and on. So what happened prior to this second generation entering into the promised land and starting to conquer it, prior to that, when Moses was still in leadership of the children of Israel, he was allowed, and they were allowed, to take land to the east of the Jordan River. Here we have a mention of the land towards the rising sun. So these 2.5 tribes, they were able to conquer portions of the land east of the Jordan. And this was once again under the leadership of Moses. So as Joshua is writing this, and again, that's kind of the perspective that we have. Very likely Joshua was the one that wrote this, even though very likely others chipped in towards the end of this story. But here, very likely as Joshua is documenting this portion of the story, it's almost like he wanted to honor Moses. Why? Well, again, Moses was this great leader. His personal mentor. Did a lot of great things. Was able to be utilized by God to free the Israelites when they were being enslaved in Egypt. And did, again, amazing things, led them in many ways. However, towards the end of his tenure, the reason why he wasn't able to go into the promised land was because he erred. He sinned. And ultimately, it was God's plan to have someone else lead the way as they actually entered into the promised land. But it seems like Joshua does not want Moses to be forgotten. Although Joshua now is the great leader, he is the one in charge. He's the one that is doing these amazing things leading the way into the conquering of the promised land and doing a great job. We've seen accounts of Joshua, many of them already, and there really isn't much to say in a negative way regarding Joshua as a person or as a leader. But again, he wanted to make sure that people did not forget about Moses. And it was almost like, okay, I know that now I am the one leading the way so that this territory can be conquered. But actually, Moses, even though he wasn't able to go into the promised land, he did something similar to this. To a lesser degree, I guess, but he led the way so that portion of the land was conquered as well. These particular tribes were able to gain their inheritance prior to us crossing the river and doing the things that I have just written or mentioned in these previous verses and chapters and portions of this account. So once again, it was a way to honor Moses. And now this leads us into this other portion where the primary person is Joshua, and how he led the Israelites, the children of Israel, to conquer these territories and to conquer the land as they entered into it after passing through the Jordan. So let me go ahead and read from verse 7 to verse 24, and it will seem very similar because once again, it's a bunch of names, a bunch of very hard to pronounce names. Previously here on the first 6 verses, we have Moses leading the charge and leading the way to conquer territories that were ruled by 2 kings. And now, from verse 7 to verse 24, we have something similar. So it's almost like Joshua was saying, just like Moses did then, I have done now. But I have done to 31 kings. 31 territories that were conquered, and these kings that ruled this region that we have been able to take as our own based on God's promises to us. So it says here, starting from verse 7, and these are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel conquered on this side of the Jordan, on the west, from Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon, as far as Mount Halak, and the ascent of Seir, which Joshua gave to the tribes of Israel as a possession according to their divisions, in the mountain country, in the lowlands, in the Jordan plains, in the slopes, in the wilderness, in the south, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So let's pause right here for a second. So this is kind of the intro. The names that are being listed here are general names of these people groups that they were able to defeat. And now from verse 9 to verse 24, we see the actual list of these 31 kings and territories that were taken over. But just as a side note, seems like a lot of kings for this portion of land, right? The actual region, geographic region of this land that was conquered is roughly the size of New Jersey. And we know that eventually it became a kingdom under one king, and then when the kingdom was divided, it was 2 kings. But, you know, compare that to 30 plus. Seems like way overblown, right? Talk about big government. Fact of the matter is, even though they are called kings, these were small city states. These were basically lords of portions of lands. And I guess they just wanted to sound impressive, right? I would rather be called a king than a lord. But it's more or less just a city-state that were ruled by individuals, and they were called kingdoms and kings, but, you know, in a very loose sense. And we see this all over the Bible, right? Whenever there's a hill, they will call it a mountain. Whenever there's a lake, they will call it a sea. And now whenever you have these, you know, these governors of cities, they are called monarchs and kings, right? Just to make them, I guess, sound a little bit more impressive. So let's see now the list that starts from verse 9. It says, the king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, which is besides Bethel, 1. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Gitter, 1. The king of Horman, 1. The king of Arab, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah, 1. The king of Bethel, 1. The king of Tapua, 1. The king of Hepher, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Lasharon, 1. The king of Maden, 1. The king of Hazor, 1. The king of Shimron, Moron, 1. The king of Akshaph, 1. The king of Tanakh, 1. The king of Medigo, 1. The king of Kadesh, 1. The king of Jokineam in Carmel, 1. The king of Dor in the heights of Dor, 1. The king of the people of Gilgal, 1. The king of Tirzah, 1. All the kings, 31. You're welcome. You are excused. Have a blessed Sunday. Very wordy, and as I mentioned, just a list of hard to pronounce names of places and the fact that they were governed by kings. So in this list of 31 city-states that were conquered, one thing that is important for us to make note of is the fact that previously we have seen stories in great detail about this that now is just being documented as a list. But the stories that we've seen previously, they are not thorough pertaining to all of the names that we saw here. Basically, here we have a list, and it's somewhat in order. It starts from the first incident all the way to the last incident, but there are 31 of them. If you were to sift back and read through the stories that we have covered, you will see that there are only half of them roughly mentioned. In the account that we read in the previous chapters, only about half are stated. And now when we have this list, this very rather boring list of territories that were conquered, there are twice as many, which basically means that Joshua picked and chose the stories that he wanted to elaborate on, but here towards the end of this section, he wanted to make note and he wanted to document the fact that there were more. There were more territories and there were more kings in this period of 7 years that they were roaming around and conquering these territories. He wanted to make sure that this was not forgotten. Of course, there are more exciting portions of the story. Of course, there are certain intriguing things that occurred with particular kings in specific battles. But there were other ones that, for whatever reason, he did not write about, but he wanted to make sure that these were all documented, that these were all saved for posterity, that these were all made available so people could look through them, so people could hear these names, so people could make sense of everything that happened in a more thorough way. And even though this is a very summarized list, again, now it has been documented. Another note that I would like to make is the fact that, and I don't know if you caught this, and I know we probably have different versions and different translations, your own personal translation. I'm reading here from the New King James Version. But if you look at the text that I just read from verse 7 to verse 24, you will find something rather odd grammatically. In English, obviously, but whenever we have punctuation in English, the original does not have punctuation, but it tries to follow kind of the rhythm of the writing in its originals. what you will notice is that there is only one period. A lot of commas, a lot of, other types of punctuations. Is it semicolons? Right? It's like a huge run-on sentence. Those of you in grade school, do not follow this type of writing style, right? If you do so, you will probably get reprimanded by your great English grade school teachers. It is a huge run-on sentence. Only one period. Why? Why not stick some periods in there? Maybe some exclamation marks to make it fancy. Some other stuff just to kind of just break the rhythm, which is redundant and continuous and somewhat tiresome. The reason, it's because this was supposed to be digested. This was supposed to be experienced as a whole. Again, Joshua has already documented portions of the story that he wanted to make available in an individual fashion, in greater details. So he talked about Jericho and the great things that happened there, just walking around and roaming around that huge fortress-like city. He talked about when they fumbled the ball with Ai, and then eventually went back and were able to defeat them. He talked about in great detail these coalition of kings that went and attacked them, and they were able to defeat said kings. He talked about, those people that kind of tricked them into making an accord with the Israelites, and eventually, they kind of became part of their people. All of those were very interesting stories. Isolated, they were rather captivating. But here, Joshua's intent was for the people to kind of digest and experience this as a whole. Why? Well, if you look at these battles and the confrontation with these enemies individually, it's somewhat impressive, but not too impressive. It's just, a war here, a battle there, fighting here, gaining this territory there. But now we get to step back and see it as a whole. And when you step back, again, put yourself not in your own shoes, which you cannot appreciate these names, but put yourself in the shoes of people that were originally reading this and experiencing this, or these generations that came afterwards that could appreciate this as a whole. When they looked at this list, when they read this list, when they heard this list, they were in awe. How could these essentially ex-slaves, they weren't a kingdom, they weren't mighty, they had numbers, but they weren't trained for battle. They roamed around the desert for 40 years and entered into the promised land, and these were all established, quote-unquote, kingdoms with armies, sometimes even heavy artilleries, as we saw previously with chariots and horses. These were men who were ready for battle, ready to defend their kingdoms, their territory. And now as we look back and see this holistically, wow. There is no way for them not to appreciate this. There is no way for them not to have this sense of gratitude. Sort of mimic the idea that Paul tried to relate in Romans chapter 8, verse 31, when he said, if God is for us, who can be against us? The answer to that is 31 kings, 33. Not even them. Put them all together, and it doesn't matter. One by one, make coalitions, if you will. It does not matter. If God is for us, who can be against us? no one. This is amazing. If you look at it as a whole, the complete list in its entirety, it is amazing. It is inspiring. They would have been in awe of this, looking from their perspective. Furthermore, and I know you caught this because it was kind of weird, the list that we have included under the portion that Joshua was responsible for, every single time the name of a city and its king, when it was made mention, the word one followed. And you would think, why didn't it go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 31? Ultimately, I don't know. But fact of the matter is, it seems like this list was meant to be counted. Counted not only by the person who was writing and reading, but actually in relationship to those who were hearing and listening. And the Bible, Scripture, to a great degree, it was originally written to be read to people out loud. People did not have access to this. They could not put it in their pocket. It was not within their phones and gadgets, or even, Bibles that are printed. They, for a great period of time, only were able to hear this. And seemingly, this was documented in a way that as the names of these cities and these kings, they were being read, people would respond with one. And one. Not one as in W-O-N, one as in one. Like another one. Oh, there's another one. Oh, and there's another one. And not only that, these regions and these tribes who were waiting for their territory to be mentioned. And they would see and hear their buddy state one, and they're just waiting. I'm waiting for the name that relates to me. I'm waiting for the city and the region that my tribe was able to inherit. And they were there just waiting and waiting and waiting, wanting to say that magical word. And when they came, they shouted out, one. Counting, 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 counting. What we have here, essentially, is a list of blessings being counted. All of these names, all of these regions, all these territories, and the tribes that eventually inherited these regions, they looked at this list, this summary, this holistic bunch of names, all put together, as a list of blessings being counted, one by one. And it's poignant. It is inspiring. If you look at it in these terms, it is motivational. Joshua chose to make this available for a purpose, and the purpose was, I want you to remember what God has given to you. Why? Because you will live through tough times. You will go through pain and obstacles. God has already predicted this. Eventually, you will suffer a lot. And when you do, once you do, I want this to be made available to you. So during those times of trouble, you will be trained to count your blessings, to remember the great things that God has done for you, to you. All the awesome things that you have already experienced. Count your blessings. You know you can do this too. Do you not know? This was not only for them. Literally, yes, but in principle, this works just as well for us. But you have to be careful. And here, I'm telling you, you have to be very careful. Because if you endeavor, if you welcome this as a lifestyle, if you dare to practice this, counting your blessing, listing them one by one, do you know what this does to you? This is literally the pity party destroyer. It will ruin your pity party. And if you like to party and pity at the same time, don't do this. If you love to party and pity, don't get near a list like this. Do not count your blessings, please. It will ruin your party. You will not have much fun having pity parties. People will just leave. The lights will be turned off. Bedtime. The neighbors will call the cops. Party's over. Your parents will come in earlier than you thought they were coming in. Party is done. Pity parties are destroyed when you count your blessings. Annihilated. Be careful. This will also serve as an encouragement in times of trouble. And if you do not like that, do not count your blessings. If you do not like to be encouraged, if you want to just kind of dwell into the negativity and the overthinking while you are experiencing times of trouble, do not count your blessings. Because ultimately, it will encourage you. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to be encouraged. No, you want times of trouble to simmer, right? You want to indulge, salivate. Just take it, just one little spoon at a time, right? Savor it, if you will. Oh, a little bit more. Another bite of trouble. Oh, let me just take my time and overthink and experience. I haven't even experienced it yet. I am enjoying times of trouble that haven't even come. I am projecting myself into the future, and I'm already suffering for something that I haven't even experienced yet. Isn't that amazing that you can do that? Wonderful. If you love that, do not count your blessings. It will ruin your ability to enter into that time machine and project yourself in the future and worry about things that haven't even occurred yet. Don't do it. Stay away. Be careful. If you count your blessings, it will undoubtedly promote a sense of gratitude. And who wants that? Who wants that? Who wants to be grateful? Just walking around being grateful and cheerful and actually thankful for what God has done and what you have, because you haven't earned a thing? You haven't deserved any of it? Who wants that? Who needs that? So don't count your blessings. Because again, if you do, the feeling of gratitude will be so uncontrollable that you will even smile. Weird, right? Smile, because, some of you are like just, the face is like a poker face. You will even smile every once in a while. Your eyes will glimmer. Even while enduring, you are facing some type of challenge. You will have this sense of, wow, I know it's hard, and I know I'm experiencing things that I would not like to experience, but my heart is content. I am actually grateful for the good things that I have experienced. And guess what? Much like night and day, much like the seasons of the year, you cannot fully appreciate one without the other. Only those of you who have experienced long nights, for whatever reason, can truly appreciate the blessing of a sunrise. Cold versus warmth, the changing of seasons of the year. And that goes for your feelings as well. Nothing wrong with being sad, a little bit blue, just as long as that is not your constant lifestyle. And when you do, picture and remember what God has done for you, you can appreciate the balance of life that has many times of happiness and blessings. It may even promote a sense of, sensitivity for the needs of others and not your own. And that's just, right? When you count your blessings, essentially what you're doing is you are enumerating, almost like putting it on a scale. And you see the weight of that. And then all of a sudden, you come to the conclusion that it's not all bad. And you have a sense of perspective. And you know that you have been blessed. And then, with that in mind, you are able to look at the world in a different way. Because if not, you look at the world as, I need stuff. I need to be cared for. I need to be helped. I need to be loved. I need to be hugged. I need to be catered to. Why aren't you doing things for me? Me, 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 me. When you count your blessings, you have this ability to take the focus away from me, 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 and actually consider what others are going through. Amazing, right? Amazing that the world does not only revolve around you. Even while you are dealing with troubles, it is amazing, but others are also dealing with troubles as well. And sometimes, and this is mind-boggling, they are even worse than your problems. And you didn't even consider that, right? That wasn't even anywhere near your mind. That other people go through challenges as well. But when you count your blessings, you're able to exhale. You're able to take a step back, consider everything around you. Context. Context is amazing. You're able to appreciate what other people are going through as well. And God forbid, even try to help others. Whoa. Whoa. So again, if you do not like any of those things, do not count your blessings. When you're down, when you're blue, when you're sad, just dwell. But if you actually want to change, if you actually want to progress, if you want to shake off of that state, list, enumerate, think about all of the things that God has already blessed you with. And at first, it may seem hard, but once you get going and warmed up, they will just flow. And you will be reminded of things that you haven't thought of in weeks, years, or maybe even ever. And you will list, and you will list, and you will list, and you will see that the list is bigger than you have ever imagined. This idea and ideal is something prevalent in the Bible. Again, the original author, very likely, did not intend to teach what I'm saying now, but the principle is here. This is a list that he made available so that they would be grateful, so they would count their blessings. And this is something that has inspired people. Even hymns written based on this premise. You guys are probably familiar with this one. I'm just going to read it because we're used to singing, and when we sing things, oftentimes we don't pay attention to the verbiage, the words. Let me just read this hymn to you. Count your blessings. And it goes like this. When upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings. Every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. When you look at others with their lands and gold, think that Christ has promised you his wealth untold. Count your many blessings money cannot buy, your reward in heaven, nor your home on high. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged. God is over all. Count your many blessings. Angels will attend, help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Amen.